44. Inside the grand halls of the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 730 delegates from 44 nations sat beneath chandeliers, the air thick with tension and cigarette smoke. The world was still burning from war, but in this room, they were about to decide how money itself would work for the next century. For over 200 years, Britain had ruled global finance. The pound sterling was the blood that pumped through the veins of world trade. But now, the empire's coffers were empty. Its debt had ballooned to 249% of GDP. The empire that once owned the oceans was drowning in bills, and everyone in that room knew it. So, for only the 5th time in recorded history, a monumental torch was passed. The power to define global wealth shifted from London to Washington, from the British pound to the American dollar. But this wasn't just an economic event. It was another chapter in a recurring human drama, a rhythm that has echoed through 5 centuries. The rise, the peak, the overreach, and the fall of every global reserve currency. And now, the US dollar shows the same early tremors that marked the end of each empire before it. To see where this leads, we must go back to where it all began. The year is 1450. Portugal stood at the dawn of a new age. With caravels cutting through unknown seas, they charted new routes around Africa to Asia and the Americas, while the fall of Constantinople in 1453 sealed off the old trade paths. Lisbon became the heartbeat of global commerce. Its currency, the Portuguese real, was accepted from the harbors of India to the markets of Japan. At its height, Portugal's empire spanned continents, but greatness breeds exhaustion. Defending far-flung outposts drained its treasury, and rivals, the Dutch, the French, the British, closed in. A royal crisis fractured the crown, and by 1580, Spain absorbed Portugal into the Iberian Union. The real had reigned for 80 years. Then, as quickly as a tide recedes, it was gone, replaced by Spanish silver. Spain's ascent began with a mountain. Potosí, in the high Bolivian Andes, unearthed in 1545, the richest vein of silver the world had ever seen. From this single mountain came half of Earth's silver for nearly a century. Coins stamped with the letter P, pieces of 8, became the first truly global currency. They were so trusted they circulated in the Americas, Europe, Asia, and even served as legal tender in the United States until 1857. For 110 years, Spain dominated trade, but the same cycle returned. Endless wars, mountains of debt. When King Charles I passed power to Philip II, he left him 36 million ducats of debt and an annual deficit of another million. Spain defaulted on its loans 4 times in a single century. Silver once symbolized strength, but now it became poison. Inflation soared, prices quadrupled, and when the silver flow slowed, the economy collapsed. By 1641, the Iberian Union fractured, and the age of Spanish silver was over. A new player emerged from the ashes, small in land, vast in innovation. The Dutch Republic transformed Amsterdam into the beating heart of the world's money. The Dutch guilder became the reserve currency of Europe, backed not by empire, but by trust and technology. The Bank of Amsterdam pioneered modern finance, reliable international transfers, the world's first stock exchange, marine insurance, and public company shares. From 1642 to 1720, the Dutch controlled a third of all world trade, but ambition turned to overreach. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War bled the nation dry. The mighty Dutch East India Company imploded under its debts. And as Amsterdam's influence waned, London rose. Britain's rise was industrial, imperial, and relentless. Powered by coal and colonies, the pound sterling became the backbone of global trade for over 2 centuries, the longest reign of any reserve currency in modern history. By the early 1800s, London was the command center of global finance. After the Great Recoinage of 1816, the pound was as good as gold, literally. At its zenith, the British Empire controlled 1/5 of humanity and 1/4 of Earth's landmass. But empires burn brightest before they fade. World War I detonated Britain's finances, its debt exploding from £650 million to over $7 billion. World War II finished the job. By 1945, Britain had won the war, but lost its empire, and its financial crown was gone. Back to Bretton Woods, 1944. Between July 1st and 22nd, the world's remaining powers forged a new system. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were born. Every major currency would now anchor to the US dollar, and the dollar itself would anchor to gold, $35 an ounce. The transfer was complete. The torch had passed to America. For 25 years, the dollar reigned unchallenged until 1971, when President Richard Nixon severed its tie to gold. The world waited for collapse. It never came. Because the US found a new foundation, not gold, but oil. In 1973, after the OPEC crisis, the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. America would protect the kingdom. In return, Saudi oil would be sold only in US dollars. By 1975, every OPEC nation agreed. Thus was born the petrodollar, a system that forced every nation on earth to hold dollars because every nation needed oil. This gave America something no empire before it had ever possessed: the ability to print the world's reserve currency without fear of collapse. For decades, the dollar's dominance seemed unbreakable. By 2000, over 70% of all global reserves were held in US dollars. But nothing lasts forever. By 2024, that number had fallen to 57.8%. Foreign investors who once funded Washington's debts are quietly stepping away, from over 50% ownership in 2008 to barely 30% in 2025. And history whispers again. The cycle that began in Portugal is nearing its next turn. The age of de-dollarization has begun. A growing coalition of nations is quietly rewriting the rules of global finance. The BRICS alliance, once a loose bloc of emerging economies, has expanded into a geopolitical powerhouse. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now joined by Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. Together, these 10 nations, alongside 13 partner states, are building a new financial backbone, the BRICS Bridge Network, a digital settlement system powered by central bank digital currencies designed to bypass the dollar completely. For the first time since 1944, the world's trade arteries are rerouting around Washington. Meanwhile, the empire of the dollar faces its own reckoning. As of March 2025, U.S. public debt has crossed $36.4 trillion. That's 124% of GDP, the largest debt load in American history. And like the empires before it, the pattern is unmistakable. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, Britain. Every one of them followed the same four-act tragedy, each lasting between 78 and 220 years, averaging about 95. The US dollar? It's 81 years into its reign, right on schedule. The four stages of empire. Stage 1, the rise. A nation breaks through with innovation, a discovery so powerful it reshapes the world. Portugal's navigators conquered the seas. Spain's silver-powered global trade. The Dutch built modern finance itself. Britain forged the industrial age. America rose on the engines of war and production. Stage 2, the peak. The empire becomes the world's clearinghouse. Its currency flows through every transaction, every port, every deal. At this height, dominance feels eternal. But eternity never lasts. Stage 3, the overreach. The cracks begin to show. Military spending surges, debt spirals, productivity slows. Portugal drained itself defending distant forts. Spain defaulted again and again. The Dutch bankrupted their own empire fighting the British. Britain's debt exploded to 270% of GDP after 2 world wars. And America, today, carries 124% debt to GDP after spending over $8 trillion on Middle Eastern wars alone. The pattern could not be clearer. Stage 4, the decline. Trust erodes, the currency weakens. Power shifts quietly elsewhere. The end is rarely sudden, but it is always certain. History is filled with echoes. Portugal never recovered after being absorbed by Spain. Spain, despite oceans of silver, sank into centuries of decline. The Netherlands remained wealthy, but small, its empire reduced to memory. Britain's power shattered after 1945. Its empire dissolved, its currency dethroned. By the 1950s, 55% of global reserves were still held in pounds. Within 20 years, that share had collapsed. The British century had ended, the American century began, and now the pendulum swings again. But this time, it's not one challenger, it's many. China rises quietly, building the digital yuan. Russia and the Gulf states conduct oil trades in local currencies. India, Indonesia, and Brazil explore regional payment systems. Even U.S. allies are testing alternatives. The shift won't happen overnight. It never does. Britain's decline took decades, long after its economy had already been surpassed. The same slow erosion is happening today, this time under the dollar's flag. History's average? 95 years. The dollar's age? 81. And the symptoms are multiplying. A shrinking share of global reserves from 70% in 2000 to 58% today. Foreign investors retreating from U.S. treasuries, down from over 50% in 2008 to just 30% now. Petrodollar deals quietly fading. A military stretched across 900 bases in 130 countries. Each empire swore it would be different. Each believed its system would last forever. But history never bargains. It only repeats in rhyme. So now the world stands on the edge of another transformation. Will the dollar's fall be gradual, like Britain's slow fade? Or sudden, like the Dutch collapse? Will one new power rise? Or will the future be multipolar, with multiple currencies sharing the global throne? No one knows. But one thing is certain. The cycle that has ruled 5 centuries of global finance is repeating before our eyes. And if history's rhythm holds, we are living through the final verses of the dollar's dominance. If this story opened your eyes, share it. Because understanding how money and power move through time is the first step to seeing where the next empire will rise.